So have any of you been on your soapbox today? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Back in the late 19th century, early 20th century, people transported goods in wooden crates. Literally, soap boxes. So this crate could have been filled with soap or other dry goods. You would send it to different cities. Merchants would take the goods out of it, and these boxes were left laying all over the place. That was a different time. We didn't have the modern technology like we have today. So people would take these wooden crates, and they would go find a street corner. The crowd would gather, and put their crate down, and they would stand up on it. Get above the crowd to talk about politics, religion, whatever the issue of the day was. I'm not going to try to stand on the crate because I'm afraid I might crash through it, which would not be good. But you get the idea. And that's where we get our modern term of on your soapbox. It means you're giving your opinion on something. Well, today, illustration from Mr. Beamer, here's our soapbox. Social media. This is what we use today to communicate with the world. And if you guys are like me, like my 16-year-old son, when you wake up in the morning, first thing you do, check out your news feed, check out what's going on, Snapchat, Twitter, whatnot. I often go in his room, make sure he's up, he's laying in bed, doing his phone. But I do it too. It's the first thing I do when I get up. I turn on my phone, I see what's going on, hit Facebook, hit Twitter, check it throughout the day. I'm sure you guys don't do that in school, right? Wait till after school. I get texts from my school. He's not supposed to have his cell phone on. You do it when you get home. You do it through the night. It's probably the last thing you do before you go to bed is check your social media feeds. And I've noticed in the talks tonight, have you noticed already how many times social media has come up? It has changed the way we communicate today. When you think about social media, it gives us wide reach. It gives us instant reach. And I'm sure you guys are familiar with the term going viral. You know, something goes out and gets retweeted or gets shared, and all of a sudden it's going all over the place. And you're famous for a few minutes because what you tweeted or what you said went viral. So social media is the way a lot of people get their news today. The American Press Institute did a study of millennials. Those are people just a little bit older than you guys, 18 to 34. I discovered y'all are called Generation Z, which I think are really bad names, so hopefully somebody maybe can come up with a better name. But millennials today, they don't use traditional news sources like your parents or grandparents did. You know, they're more likely to get it from Facebook, from Twitter, from YouTube, Tumblr, maybe Yik Yak if you're in college. So all these different social media is how they get their news. Now, they're still interested in the news. They're just not doing it the way I typically do, your parents did. And y'all are probably like that too. But there's a warning about relying on these sources for your news. It's not always reliable. Sometimes things you read on social media is not true. You guys, your challenge, you have got to be a wary news consumer. You've got to have a degree of skepticism. As I was monitoring Twitter this week, I saw something from Dan Rather. I have to ask your parents who Dan Rather was. He was an anchor on CBS News. But he said young people today need a healthy dose of skepticism. And I think that's true, especially when you're using social media to get your news. I want to share two examples with you that have happened recently to sort of show you some of the pitfalls of social media. As I mentioned, my son, who I consider a very savvy user of social media, he came into our den at the house a couple weeks ago. He said, "Dad, did you hear that Tom Brady has been suspended for the whole year?" And of course, those of you who are sports fans know that Tom Brady may or may not have taken air out of footballs in the NFL playoffs. The NFL came down pretty hard on him eventually. He got suspended for 4 games. But this interaction took place before he was actually suspended. So my son came to me and said that, and I just couldn't imagine Tom Brady was suspended for the whole season. And so I said, well, let me check on that. So I went to ESPN, a website I use a lot, no mention of it. And I said, I just don't think that's right. Well, my son got to looking a little bit closer, and he was reading it, he thought, from Bleacher Report, which is a legitimate sports website. Well, it turned out it was a troll account of Bleacher Report, made to look like the real Bleacher Report, but it was not. And he felt kind of bad about it. He was kind of embarrassed. But it just goes to show you, people like you that know your way around social media, it can happen. You can be tricked. The other one came up, and it was something that we ended up having to deal with at the newspaper here in Lexington. Some of our city officials will appreciate this one. We keep an eye on this Facebook page where people can go in and make comments about things going on in Davidson County and Lexington. So one day, something popped up on this Facebook page that they were going to build a roundabout right up here in the middle of Lexington, in the square. If there's anybody here who's lived in Lexington your whole life, you may remember the Confederate statue that used to be there a long, long time ago. Well, supposedly they're going to put a roundabout in the middle of Lexington. Any of you have been out to the college, you know what a roundabout is. You know, you got to make sure you get out or you just drive around in circles. Not a big fan of roundabouts. But we've not heard this. You know, and that's, wow, that's big news. That's a big change for Lexington. So we called some city officials, probably called Alan, said, hey, what have you heard about this roundabout in the middle of Lexington? I hadn't heard anything about it. So we called the State Department of Transportation officials and said, hey, what's going on with this roundabout in the middle of Lexington? Like, we're not doing a roundabout. Well, it turned out it was a complete hoax. The guy that posted it, who did not comment, by the way, when we called to try to find out why he did this, he put that out there, and it was just flat out a lie. It was not true. And I'm still not quite sure what his intention was, but what happened was people started commenting on it because they thought it was true. They thought we were going to have a roundabout in the middle of Lexington. And that was a case where we ended up having to do a story saying, no, this is not true, this is not happening, there's not going to be a roundabout in the middle of Lexington. There's an old adage that journalists follow that says if your mom says she loves you, check it out. Make sure it's true. And that's a little extreme, but the idea is we're going to verify things. You know, we're going to make sure they're true before we go out and report them. I mean, it's in our DNA. It's something we do. And to give you a quick example of that, you know, we monitor a police scanner in our newsroom. Well, if you listen to the police scanner all day, you'd think, you know, this is like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie and apocalypse is happening because you're always hearing these dire things that are happening. Thankfully, most of them turn out not to be true. So we hold off before we start reporting these things. You know, you hear an alarm at a bank, you know, there's a bank robbery. Well, most of the time it's a false alarm. So we don't report that. However, this day and age of modern technology, with social media, somebody at home with one of those emergency scanners, and yes, there are people who listen to the scanner at their house, they can put that out there. They hear that same call and they say, oh, there's a bank robbery downtown. But it's not true. And so all of a sudden people are worried, oh, the bank's been robbed, my husband's in law enforcement, what if he has to go, what if somebody starts shooting at him? You know, my husband works at the bank, you know, what if he's, you know, something's happened to him? So you can see the danger of putting stuff out there before you verify, because you've immediately got this wide reach, and you've got this immediacy that all of a sudden goes out there. And so, you know, you've got to be careful what you do with social media. So here's a couple tips that I want to pass along to you about social media. First of all, if you read something that you're not sure about, it just doesn't quite sound right, check some other sources. That's what I did with my son. You know, I checked ESPN and nothing there, so I felt pretty quickly like, okay, I don't think this is true. You know, check several sites, and if you don't see it other places, it's probably not true. One of my favorite websites is one called Snopes.com, SNOPES.com. Their whole job is to shoot down internet rumors, email forwards, and urban legends. So if you see something show up that sounds kind of crazy, check that website out. A lot of times it'll say, no, this is not true. You see that all the time about Facebook, you know, getting your personal information and stuff. Some of you are in a unique position. You can go directly to the source. We have America's most tweetingest mayor. We have a city manager who's accessible, city council people. You've got teachers, superintendents, business people, people you can trust. So when you read something, particularly if it's local, go to these people. Ask them, is this true? Is this really happening? And figure it out. Now, I don't mean to imply that traditional media is infallible. Many of you are familiar with Brian Williams, the NBC News anchor, who's suspended right now because he embellished some stories he said about the Iraq War. There was a very infamous case recently with Rolling Stone magazine, which reported an incident at University of Virginia where a woman claimed she'd been sexually assaulted by several people at the fraternity party. Turns out it was not true. She made it up. Rolling Stone had to commission an investigation of the whole process and run a retraction, making it look very bad. But in that case, there's some traditional media that, sort of started investigating that and said, hey, this isn't quite adding up. So again, skepticism is something I want you to develop, something you can use to make sure these things add up, make sure that they make sense. And one other thing I wanted to mention about social media. Be careful to know the difference between fact and opinion. There's a lot of people today that want to pass off their opinions as facts, and you have to be careful for that. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of barbecue restaurants in Lexington. That's a fact. Lexington barbecue is the best barbecue anywhere. That's an opinion. Probably one most of us agree with, but an opinion nonetheless. So you see the difference there? You have to be careful, especially again today when things are so divisive at times, so partisan. You want to make sure you know the difference between fact and opinion. It's okay for people to, give their opinion on social media. I mean, that's what it's for a lot of times. But just know the difference about whether somebody's sharing a fact or whether they're sharing their opinion. In closing, I want to encourage you to populate your social media feed with sources you can trust. Okay? They're out there. It may be a good friend, maybe a teacher, it may be an unconventional news source. I hope it includes a traditional media outlet. But whatever you do, always approach things with a little bit of skepticism. Be wary, especially if it's something that just doesn't quite sound right. Because you don't want to be the one to pass on something and then have to deal with the embarrassment to find out, oh, that really wasn't true. So whenever you feel like you need to get on your soapbox, just make sure that it's true and that what you're sharing is something that needs to be out there, that you need to share with other people. Thank you.